Kofi Kusi had always known that a day would come when he would have to make a decision that could alter the course of his life. That day arrived sooner than he expected. On the very afternoon he received his final school certificate. The village of Ayensudo was small, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests in West Africa. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and traditions were held dear. For generations, Kofi's family had tilled the land, working tirelessly to coax life out of the stubborn soil. The farm had provided enough to live on, but not much more. As a child, Kofi had often dreamt of something beyond the endless rows of crops, of a life that was different from the one his parents had known. Yet, as he stood at this crucial juncture, his thoughts were not as clear as he had once imagined they would be. His friends had already made their choices. Most had decided to leave Ayensudo for the bustling cities where opportunities seemed to grow on every corner, like the rich, ripe mangoes that hung from the village's trees. They talked of big jobs, fancy clothes, and modern apartments with a sense of excitement that was contagious. Kofi couldn't deny that the idea of city life was appealing. The stories he heard from returning friends painted a picture of endless possibilities, a life where hard work was rewarded with more than just survival. But Kofi also knew that these dreams often came with a price. The city was a place of strangers, of competition, and of relentless hustle. It was far from the warmth of his family's home and the familiarity of the village. Kofi's father, a man of few words, had taught him everything he knew about farming. Their connection to the land was deep, almost spiritual. Every tree, every patch of earth had a story, and those stories were intertwined with the Kusi family's history. To leave the farm felt like abandoning not just his heritage, but a part of himself. Yet, to stay meant embracing a life that was fraught with uncertainty and hard work, with no guarantees of success. The farm was struggling, the yields had been poor in recent years, and the tools they used were old and often broke down. Staying meant fighting an uphill battle. As the sun set over the fields that evening, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Kofi made his decision. He would stay. It was not just a choice, it was a commitment. A commitment to his family, to the land, and to the village that had nurtured him. He would fight to turn the farm around no matter the challenges. As he looked out over the land, he felt a sense of peace settle over him, knowing that he was choosing a path that was true to who he was. The city could wait. Ayensudo needed him now. The decision to stay in the village was one that Kofi knew would not be understood by everyone. But what he hadn't anticipated was the extent of the ridicule he would face from those he considered friends. The news of his choice spread quickly through Ayensudo, as news often did in small communities. The very next weekend, a group of his schoolmates who had already started their new lives in the city returned to the village. They were eager to show off their new clothes, their modern gadgets, and the confidence they had gained from living in a place where dreams seemed to come true overnight. Kofi had always enjoyed the camaraderie of his friends, but now, as they gathered at the local bar, he felt a distance between them that he couldn't quite bridge. The joke started innocently enough, a teasing remark about his dusty boots, a comment about his worn-out shirt. But as the night wore on, the mockery became more pointed. They laughed at his decision to stay on the farm, calling him a fool for clinging to the past when the future was waiting for him in the city. Kofi the farmer, they jeered. tilling the land while we rake in the money. The words stung more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the attitude behind them that hurt the most. These were friends who had shared dreams with him, who had grown up alongside him, and now they looked at him as if he were less than them, an object of pity, or worse, of amusement. They couldn't understand why he would choose the hard life of a farmer when there were seemingly easier paths to take. To them, the village represented a life of limitations, a place that was left behind in the pursuit of progress. Kofi in their eyes was clinging to something that no longer had value. As they continued to drink and laugh, Kofi found himself withdrawing into himself. He knew that their mockery was born out of ignorance, that they couldn't see the value in what he was trying to do. But it didn't make their words hurt any less. He left the bar early that night, walking home alone under the stars. The cool night air did little to soothe the ache in his chest. He was beginning to realize that the path he had chosen would be a lonely one. His friends, the people he had grown up with, were now on a different trajectory, and he was left to navigate his journey without them. Yet, even in the face of their mockery, Kofi felt a growing resolve. The more they laughed at him, the more determined he became to prove them wrong. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his family, for the land that had sustained them, and for the village that had given him so much. As he reached home, he looked out over the fields bathed in the soft light of the moon. The crops were struggling, but they were still there, rooted in the earth just as he was. Kofi knew that he couldn't let the mockery of others sway him from the path he had chosen. The first few months after Kofi's decision to stay on the farm were some of the hardest he had ever faced. Each day began before the sun rose and ended long after it had set. The farm was in worse condition than he had anticipated. The soil was tired from years of overuse, and the tools he relied on were rusty and prone to breaking. Without the funds to invest in better equipment or fertilizers, Kofi had to make do with what he had. Every task seemed to take twice as long, and the work was back-breaking. But Kofi pressed on, determined to breathe new life into the farm. The weather too was unforgiving. The rainy season, which the villagers depended on for their crops, had become unpredictable. Some years the rains didn't come at all, leaving the fields parched and the crops withering under the relentless sun. Other times, when the rains finally did arrive, they came in torrents, washing away the seeds and leaving the land a soggy mess. Kofi had grown up in Ayensudo, and he knew that farming was never easy. But now that he was responsible for the farm's survival, the weight of each failed crop felt like a personal blow. Market prices were another challenge. The local market, once a reliable place for selling produce, had become increasingly competitive. Prices were low, and it was hard to make a profit. Kofi often found himself at the mercy of middlemen who offered him a pittance for his hard-earned crops, knowing he had little choice but to accept. The money he made was barely enough to cover the farm's expenses, let alone provide for his own needs or think about the future. It was a constant struggle to keep the farm afloat, and there were days when Kofi wondered if he had made the right decision by staying. The physical exhaustion was one thing, but the emotional toll was another. Kofi had never felt so isolated. His friends had moved on, and the village seemed to view him with a mixture of pity and skepticism. To them, he was just a young man stubbornly clinging to a way of life that was slowly dying. Even his family, while supportive, couldn't hide their worry. They saw the toll the work was taking on him and feared that he might burn himself out before he could turn the farm around. In his darkest moments, Kofi found himself questioning everything. The city life that he had turned his back on seemed increasingly attractive, an escape from the relentless grind of farming. He imagined what his life could have been if he had followed his friends, living in a place where the work was less physically demanding and the rewards were more immediate. But whenever these thoughts crept in, Kofi would push them aside. He knew that if he left now, he would be abandoning not just the farm, but everything it stood for. His heritage, his family's legacy, and his own sense of purpose. Kofi's father, though aging, remained a source of quiet strength. He had seen the farm through its ups and downs and understood the rhythms of the land better than anyone. Though his body was no longer as strong as it once was, his wisdom was invaluable. He taught Kofi not just how to work the land, but how to listen to it, how to understand its needs, and how to care for it in a way that would sustain it for future generations. It was this connection to the land, this deep-rooted respect for it, that kept Kofi going, even when everything else seemed to be falling apart. Just when Kofi thought things couldn't get any worse, the news of Ama's decision came like a punch to the gut. Ama had been Kofi's girlfriend since they were teenagers. They had grown up together, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of the village and the seasons of the farm. She had been his confidant, his supporter, the one person who believed in him when no one else did. Or so he had thought. Ama had always been ambitious, dreaming of a life beyond the confines of Ayensudo. She had often spoken about wanting to see the world, to experience the excitement of the city, and to live a life that was different from the one her parents had known. Kofi had listened, understanding her desire for something more. But he had also hoped that she would see the value in staying, that she would share in his vision for the farm and their future together. But as time went on, it became clear that Ama's dreams were taking her in a different direction. When one of Kofi's friends, Kwame, who had left for the city, returned to the village with stories of his success, Ama was captivated. Kwame had found a good job, earned a decent income, and was living a life that Ama had always dreamed of. He was well dressed, confident, and spoke of the city with an enthusiasm that Kofi couldn't match. It wasn't long before Ama began spending more time with Kwame and less with Kofi. She was drawn to the promise of a better life, one that didn't involve the hard, uncertain work of farming. Kofi tried to ignore the growing distance between them, convincing himself that Ama would come around, and that she would see the potential in the life they could build together. But deep down, he knew that her heart was no longer with him. The final blow came when Ama told him that she was leaving the village to marry Kwame. She didn't sugarcoat her reasons. She wanted a life of security, of comfort, of progress, and she didn't see that with Kofi. "You have your farm, Kofi," she said, "and I have my dreams. You want different things." The words cut deeper than any of the struggles Kofi had faced on the farm. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just of Ama, but of the future he had envisioned with her. The life he had hoped to build now seemed emptier, lonelier, Ama's departure was a stark reminder of the choices he had made and the sacrifices those choices demanded. She left the village soon after, and with her went the last thread of the life Kofi had once imagined. The days that followed were some of the hardest Kofi had ever known. The farm, already a source of constant challenge, now felt like a prison, one that had cost him not just his friends, but the woman he loved. Every task became a reminder of what he had lost. Every empty field, a symbol of his isolation. The villagers who had always seen Ama and Kofi as a couple were sympathetic but unsure of what to say. They watched him with a mix of pity and curiosity, wondering if this latest blow would finally be enough to drive him away. But Kofi, though heartbroken, was not broken. If anything, Ama's departure hardened his resolve. He realized that if he was going to make a success of the farm, he would have to do it alone. He would have to find strength within himself to push through the pain and focus on the work at hand. The farm was all he had left, and he wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. Ama had chosen her path, and now Kofi had to walk his, no matter how difficult it might be. Amidst the growing challenges and the emotional turmoil of losing Ama, Kofi found an unexpected source of support in Adjoa. Adjoa had always been a presence in the village, kind, quiet, and often overlooked. She came from a modest family that, like Kofi's, had deep roots in Ayensudo. While many young people in the village dreamed of leaving for the city, Adjoa had never shown much interest in the idea. She was content with the simplicity of village life, finding joy in the small things, helping her mother in the kitchen, tending to their garden, and caring for her younger siblings. Adjoa had known Kofi for as long as she could remember, though they had never been particularly close. She admired his dedication to his family's farm, even when others mocked him for it. Unlike many in the village, Adjoa saw the value in the land and the importance of staying true to one's roots. She had heard the whispers about Kofi's struggles and his recent heartbreak, and her heart went out to him. She knew that farming was not just about working the land. It was about nurturing it, understanding it, and more importantly, believing in it, even when others didn't. One afternoon, as Kofi was laboring under the hot sun, trying to fix a broken plow, Adjoa approached him. She brought with her a simple meal: freshly baked bread, some fruit, and a cool drink. Kofi was surprised to see her, as they hadn't spoken much before, but he was grateful for the company. Adjoa's presence was soothing, her gentle voice a balm to his weary soul. They talked about the farm, about the challenges he was facing, and about the village. Adjoa listened intently, offering words of encouragement and understanding. She didn't try to fix his problems or offer solutions. She simply listened, and that was exactly what Kofi needed. Over the next few weeks, Adjoa began visiting the farm regularly, helping Kofi with whatever tasks needed doing. She wasn't afraid of getting her hands dirty, and her willingness to pitch in lightened Kofi's load in ways he hadn't realized he needed. Adjoa's quiet strength and unwavering support gave Kofi something to look forward to each day. Her presence was a reminder that he wasn't as alone as he had thought, that there were still people who believed in him, even when he struggled to believe in himself. As they worked together, Kofi began to see Adjoa in a new light. She wasn't flashy or ambitious like Ama. But there was a steadiness to her, a deep well of kindness and resilience. She understood the rhythms of village life and appreciated the simple pleasures that came with it. Kofi found himself drawn to her warmth and her quiet determination. She became more than just a helping hand. She became a source of inspiration. Where others saw a farm that was struggling, Ajua saw potential. Where others doubted Kofi's decision to stay, Ajua saw it as a sign of strength and character. It wasn't long before the village began to notice the bond forming between Kofi and Ajua. While some were surprised, others, especially the elders, saw it as a natural fit. Ajua's parents, however, were initially hesitant. They had hoped their daughter would marry someone with a more stable future, someone who had already made a success of themselves. But Ajua was firm in her choice. She saw something in Kofi that others didn't. His potential, his dedication, and his willingness to work for what he had believed in. With Ajua by his side, Kofi found a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that the farm wasn't just about making a living. It was about building something lasting, something that could sustain not just him, but future generations. Ajua's belief in him gave him the strength to keep going, even when the challenges seemed insurmountable. Together, they began to plan for the future, envisioning a farm that was not just surviving, but thriving. And for the first time in a long time, Kofi felt that the future was within reach. After months of hard work, sweat, and countless hours in the fields, Kofi and Ajua's efforts finally began to bear fruit, literally. The harvest season arrived, and with it came the first real signs of success. The crops, which had once struggled under the harsh conditions, were now healthy and abundant. The maize was tall and golden, the yams were plump and ready to be dug up, and the vegetables, once sparse and small, were now vibrant and full of life. It was a sight that filled Kofi with a sense of pride and accomplishment he had never known before. The first harvest was a crucial moment for the farm. It was all a test of all the hard work Kofi and Ajua had put in, a moment that would determine whether the farm could truly be sustainable. The days leading up to the harvest were filled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Kofi knew that if the harvest failed, it would be a significant setback, one that could make or break the future of the farm. But he also knew that they had done everything they could to ensure success. They had worked tirelessly to improve the soil, to protect the crops from pests, and to manage the limited water supply. Now, it was time to see if their efforts would pay off. The harvest itself was a community affair. The villagers who had been watching Kofi's progress, with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, came out to help. Old and young alike joined in, eager to be part of the process. It was a tradition in Ayensudo for the community to come together during the harvest, and this year there was a renewed sense of excitement in the air. People who had once doubted Kofi's decision to stay on the farm were now eager to lend a hand, to see for themselves what he had accomplished. As the first ears of maize were gathered, Kofi felt a surge of emotion. The sight of the full baskets, the sound of laughter and chatter among the villagers, and the smell of fresh earth all combined to create a moment that was almost surreal. It was a culmination of months of back-breaking work, of nights spent worrying about the future, and of days when he had questioned whether he could keep going. But now, as he watched the harvest coming, he knew that it had all been worth it. Ajua was by his side throughout the entire process, her presence a constant source of support and encouragement. She worked as hard as anyone, her hands just as dirty and her clothes just as worn. But there was a light in her eyes that mirrored Kofi's own, a sense of shared accomplishment and joy. They had done this together, and it was a moment that solidified their bond even further. The villagers, too, began to see them not just as individuals, but as a team, a partnership that was destined to bring good things to the village. The harvest was a success, not just in terms of the quantity of the crops, but in the quality as well. The produce was fresh, healthy, and more abundant than anyone had expected. When Kofi took the first batch to the market, he was met with a response that exceeded his hopes. The buyers were impressed with the quality, and the prices were better than he had anticipated. For the first time, Kofi saw a real profit from the farm, a profit that he immediately decided to reinvest in the land. With the money from the harvest, Kofi bought new tools, better seeds, and a small irrigation system that would help protect the crops during the dry season. He also began building a small warehouse on the farm, a place where they could store produce and supplies, making the farm more efficient and better equipped to handle future harvests. It was a step towards sustainability, a move that showed the village that Kofi was not just surviving. He was planning for the future. The success of the first harvest was a turning point, not just for the farm, but for Kofi as well. It proved to him and to everyone else that his decision to stay, to fight for the land, was the right one. The farm, which had once been a symbol of struggle and hardship, was now a beacon of hope, a sign that with hard work and determination, anything was possible. And as Kofi looked out over the fields, now full of life and promise, he knew that this was just the beginning. Thank you for watching. The AfriFolk Tales team invites you to subscribe to our channel, like this video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for our next video.